So it has been a while since I've done one of these computer builds, and this one I think is one of my best ones. And a big thank you to AMD for sponsoring this build. Sponsorship aside, I enjoyed this build so much. Also, this does not affect the results of anything. All the pricing will be linked below, as pricing can change often. Let's talk about the case. This case is the Height Y60. I absolutely love what Height is doing, and I'm actually working on a Y40 build too coming up, so make sure you are subscribed for that. The Y60 is a great looking computer case. It features a 3-piece panoramic glass that gives you access to all the components inside. I love this little angled piece right here, and I think it gives you just a unique perspective whichever side you look at it. The case does come with 4 pre-installed fans, and there are vents all over the place, which allows this PC to stay cool. Now we're going to talk about the temps a little bit later in the video, so don't worry. This build is also dead silent under no load, and is hardly audible when gaming. But what I really like about it is this screen. You can loop a GIF or put static images. You can also see PC performance metrics, see what music is playing from Spotify. You can do all this stuff and a whole lot more using the NZXT Cam software. I had so much fun playing with this software, I think a little too much fun, but just being able to customize it the exact way you want is really cool. Moving on to the processor, this is the AMD Ryzen 7 7800X3D. It's 4.2 gigahertz with 16 threads. It's featuring a max boost clock up to 5 gigahertz. This processor is made for gaming, and you can definitely tell. Now the video card is the XFX Speedster Merc 310 AMD Radeon RX 7900 XTX. Whew. Now this is the top of the line graphics card. It supports HDMI 2.1, DisplayPort 2.1, and it has some crazy specs inside. Let's unpack it. It has 24 gigabytes of GDDR VRAM, 20 gigabytes per second of memory speed, 960 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth. This card is an absolute beast. And combine that with the processor, and you've got yourself a really good combination for gaming. We'll see how it performs later in the video because these numbers are really good. The motherboard is a Gigabyte X670 Gaming. Now this BIOS was not fully optimized for this newest chipset, so I was running into some issues like slow posting and inconsistent performance. Now once I updated the BIOS, everything cleared up. So make sure you're updating those BIOS. So make sure you update that BIOS when you get a new computer. Now beyond its gaming performance, I do love the amount of ports that are on the back. This definitely comes in handy if you're gonna be streaming too, because these ports can fill up fast. Power supply, I went with the Corsair RM1000X, Samsung 990 Pro 2TB M2 PCIe, Kingston Fury Beast 16 gigabytes with DDR5 and 6000. Now I love the RGB action on these RAM sticks. You can go into the software and customize the colors and the flow of the colors. It just, once again, I'm a sucker for RGB, what can I say? But just to really get the flow of the case, making the case have a cohesive color pattern is really nice, and being able to control the RAM sticks too, just kind of the icing on the cake. I did order some custom cabling too, from the graphics cards to the motherboard and to the power supply, but those did not come in yet, unfortunately. But be looking out in the comments. I'll post a new picture once those cables come in, because that is really going to set it off. Super pretty computer, cool. But let's talk about benchmarks. Let's talk about gaming. Everything is set to max quality settings like textures and shadow quality. And we also prioritize ray tracing to get the best possible looking game. Now starting with F123 using the built-in benchmark tool. Starting with 1080p resolution with ray tracing and AMD's Fidelity FX Super Resolution, which I'm gonna call FSR, was set to quality, which is the highest setting. We had a high of 228, average of 169, and a low of 97. At 1440p, with the same settings with ray tracing and FSR set to quality, we had the high of 168, 121 average, and a low of 83. At 4K resolution, with ray tracing on and FSR off, we had a high of 57, average of 37, and a low of 23. Now with ray tracing and FSR set to quality mode, we had the high of 94, average of 66, and a low of 44. Now still in 4K resolution, with ray tracing off and FSR on quality mode, we had a high of 216, an average of 177, and a low of 164. It is absolutely no surprise that ray tracing takes up a lot of frames per second, but in my opinion, when you're around 100 frames per second, it is totally worth it to have ray tracing turned on. The next game is Cyberpunk, which is a graphically intensive game. Let's see how well this computer did. Now using the built-in benchmark tool, ultra settings with ray tracing at FSR, 1080p, the high was 140 frames per second, average was 93, and a low was 61. Ultra settings with ray tracing and FSR on, 1440p resolution, high was 91, average was 67, and a low was 56. Same settings as the previous test, high of 73, average of 56, and a low of 42. The next game is Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Keeping FSR off just because I want the game to look the best, and when you turn FSR on, you get some crazy high frames per second, like 150. So I really want the game to look the best and play the best, trying to find those perfect settings that kind of accomplishes both. 1080p resolution with ray tracing and FSR off, there was a high of 103, average of 97, and a low of 70. 1440p ray tracing on and FSR off, we had a high of 99, average of 86, and a low of 63. 4K ray tracing on and quality mode turned on for FSR, with a high of 83, average of 74, and a low of 48. And then 4K with ray tracing and FSR off, with a high of 82, average of 45, and a low of 34. The final game in this benchmark is going to be Dead Space. And the benchmarks were insane, over 200 frames per second, so we're gonna go straight to 1440p. 1440p ray tracing and TAA anti-aliasing, ambient occlusion on and FSR off, 163 frames per second, average 145 and a low of 89. Same settings on 4K, high of 82, average 73, low of 52. Then we had 4K FSR on quality with ray tracing and ambient occlusion, high of 131, average of 118, and a low of 75. And then for the heck of it, I ran a benchmark. This is Cinebench. CPU multi-score is 17194, and single core is 1761. So I want to know, what do you think about this PC? What would you have done differently? I know this is a pretty expensive PC, but this is a high-end graphics card and a high-end processor, so I didn't want to cheap out on the rest of the computer. If you want to watch more videos from me, click on this card.